Hey, it's that time of the week again, which means I'm going to be answering your questions from the previous week's videos. So whenever you put questions in the comment section or whenever you just post interesting comments, I filter through them and I grab what I think are the most interesting and would merit a good answer here on a public video. So this time I'm recapping some of the videos from before Christmas time. Obviously we had a week off during the Christmas period, so I want to go back and recap some of the days prior to Christmas. So the first video that I want to break down in terms of the comments and the questions is going to be my fasting results, the bone broth fasting finale. So what this video was a recap of my bone broth fast that I did for 3 days. Okay, I did a 3-day bone broth fast and I chronicled everything, I logged everything, and then I did a recap video that sort of broke down what I experienced and some of my results. So the first question comes from David Ohin, and he says, how do you measure your keto and glucose? What gadget do you use? So I was using the Keto Mojo meter. I felt that that was probably the easiest one to use, and it tells me both my blood glucose and my ketone measurements, as well as hemoglobin and hematocrit, which is very helpful too. Then Zakk Hann says, it was nice being a part of the fast with you, Thomas. About the sugar binge the day prior, do you think that you could have reduced your blood glucose rapidly if you did extreme HIIT explosive cardio before the fast, right after eating the sugar? So what Zakk's referring to is when I went into this fast the day before, I binged. I had some Halo Top ice cream. I had what's called a Karma donut, which is like a spelt flour, buckwheat flour, gluten-free, coconut sugar donut. I wouldn't exactly say it's like, you know, hardcore unhealthy, but definitely more carbs and sugar than I would normally have. I just wanted to enjoy a treat before I didn't eat for 3 days. And I found that my blood sugar was high, kind of to be expected. And to answer your question, I don't know if explosive cardio or HIIT would have really brought that down all that much. In fact, it could have made it higher because it would have made me more insulin resistant at that very point in time going into the fast. So it's hard to tell. I think I'll do an experiment on that though. Nick Sestan says, is it true that if you aren't fat adapted, your brain needs 150 grams of carbs a day? And if so, would having 150 grams of carbs a day and fasting for 16 hours still be considered low carb? Of course, nowhere near keto, but still low carb. Nick, I don't think their brain needs 150 grams of carbs if you're not in keto. I think that that number is closer to 70 or 80. So I would probably err on the side of caution, more like that, under 100. Angela Bush says, do you usually only take black coffee as a pre-workout, or have you tried any other supplements such as beta-alanine? Black coffee is usually just my jam. I sometimes mess around with beta-alanine, sometimes I'll mess around with like citrulline malate, sometimes I'll mess around with arginine. Another thing I like to play with is dynamine and T-crine. I've done videos on those. Those are derivatives of caffeine that have no like tolerance effect. So those are powerful. Look those up on Amazon, dynamine, D-Y-N-A-M-I-N-E, and T-crine, T-E-A-C-R-I-N-E. Okay, Russian Peg says, in an earlier video you mentioned breaking a fast by fruits is bad, but in other videos you say breaking a fast with rice cakes is good. What's the difference? Fruits are fructose, so they go straight to the liver. Rice cakes actually can restore muscle glycogen. Fruit cannot. So basically fruit, you can only absorb a tiny bit before it gets stored as fat, whereas the rice cakes, even though they're a grain, they're at least going to help you absorb the rest in the muscles. Then Ned Sped says, hey Thomas, you think doing the fast every month would be good? I'm thinking 2 days out of the month. I think a 48-hour fast once monthly is perfect. Jeff Herska says, what happens to the gut bacteria in a prolonged fast, 10 days or more? Should you eat fermented foods to replenish the bacteria? I'm not a fan of adding fermented foods to replenish bacteria. I think that you should eat probiotic or prebiotic rich foods. So talking asparagus, we're talking things like that. They're going to help the existing bacteria grow. When you starve yourself for a little bit, your bacteria is going to balance out to whatever is the strongest and the healthiest. So just continue to fertilize and feed that. Healthy Cook for Champion says, did I feel any significant improvements with your joints while during the bone broth fast? I did actually. I felt really, really good. And I felt pretty good up until about 4 or 5 days afterwards. But 4 or 5 days afterwards also led into Christmas, which means that I was a little bit off my game, still eating clean. So it was hard to tell if that inflammation would have stayed reduced had I not started having some gluten-free treats and gluten-free pie and stuff, but who knows. Okay, next video was ordering keto and fasting drinks at Starbucks, day in the life vlog. So this was a video where I went around, went to different Starbucks and got different keto and fasting drinks. I showed you what it looks like to order and what you should go for. It was a really cool video. If you haven't already, make sure you check it out. Bradford Braddington says, if I drink green tea on an empty stomach, I will puke within the hour. What gives? I've experienced that too. So I don't know exactly what causes it. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. If it's in the morning and it's right after a workout and I have green tea, I definitely feel it. I don't know, I have a feeling it's just the acidity. Even though green tea is not too acidic, it's probably the case. What You Expect says, You say not to consume fatty cuts of meat, but what if the lean meat is not very high quality? For example, at TJ's you can get 99% lean ground turkey for a very good price, but organic turkey, lean or not, is quite expensive. So my question is, the meat you consume is lean enough, talking around 99%, does it matter where it came from at all? Sure, it's more ethical, but still, I get what you're saying. Okay, I mean, all ethics and moral stuff aside, let's take a look at, tit for tat what it is. 99%, if it's not as good quality meat, at least you're not going to have as many toxins stored in the fat. I'd say the leaner the cut of meat, the more flexibility you have to go with maybe not organic if possible. Okay? I mean, that's just where it comes down to. I always say go organic whenever you can, but if you're going to not go organic, then try to go as lean as humanly possible. D-Alt says, why not heavy cream versus half and half if keto? Heavy cream's lower carb content. It doesn't have nearly as much in the way of the milk sugar. Okay, half and half is harder to break down, whereas heavy cream is just more so just the fat. Chris Laterio says, what are your thoughts on espresso? How do you compare that to coffee before and after workouts? How many shots is one allowed? No, I'm totally fine with espresso. So I feel like espresso doesn't absorb quite as quick as like cold brew does, but espresso is still totally good. It's actually lower caffeine content than most people think. It's like 60 to 80 milligrams in a shot. Matthew Tortorello says, what are your thoughts on the keto pink drink from Starbucks? It's a lot of cream. I mean, to be honest, it's a lot of half and half. I know exactly the drink you're talking about. My wife ordered it once just to see, but it's a lot of half and half. I mean, I guess, then again, so is that breve latte that I ordered in that video. So it's okay, but again, not a big fan of the artificial sweeteners. Libba Hagerson says, does almond milk turn to phytates the same way as when we eat almonds? No, almond milk does not, because the phytates are actually in the skin usually. So when you sprout an almond, things like that, you don't have it. Almonds, when you're making almond milk, you're essentially kind of sprouting it in a way. You're filtering it, making the milk, so you're not going to have the phytic acid. Okay, the next video was, should you count calories? This video was epic. I was so proud of this video because it flipped the whole diet paradigm on its head. All the guys out there that give me beef because I'm a keto and fasting guy, they assume that I just never look at calories at all and that I'm just preaching that the keto diet trumps all. Okay, that's not the case, and this video breaks it down. It breaks down my reasoning, and if you haven't watched it, you need to go back and check it out because it was a great, almost rant, but it made a lot of sense, and I think a lot of people liked it. So NK says, so if you don't count your calories, then how do you measure maximum nutrient efficiency for developing muscle growth, etc.? Well, you still have a checks and balances. I think you should always know where your baseline is, okay? But the fact is, while my point was that you can still count calories, but don't count them necessarily over the course of a day, because there might be a day where you have 0 calories. I guess in theory, you're still counting them because you're keeping track of them, but the point is that your calories don't matter over the course of the day. They matter over the course of multiple days. Envision Holding says, even if you were to track your calories for the week, you still need to track your calories daily to know the weekly total, don't you? So you still have to track daily. Maybe I'm missing your point. Envision Holdings, that makes perfect sense. The whole purpose of the video wasn't to say yes or no to counting calories. It was to explain the fact that some days you won't eat, some days you will eat, some days you'll eat less. And the fact is, over the course of the week is where it matters. And you're gonna have different periods of time where you're fasting and things like that, where you have more of a pronounced effect in terms of what your body's recruiting for energy at that point in time. So if you're in a calorie deficit during the course of a day, but you're not having long periods of time between meals, you might lose weight, you might be in a calorie deficit, but you're more likely to burn more muscle, whereas if you are fasting, you have hormonal effects that come into place at different hours and different points in time that preserve more muscle. So the point is, it's all about how long can you go between meals strategically. Not always how long can you go in general, but strategically, how long can you time your meals out? Mallory Wilson says, Thomas, will you agree that maybe we should not count calories, but if our main goal is fat loss, how will we be able to hold ourselves accountable or see what is not working or causing a plateau? Basically, how would you suggest one tracks macros? Honestly, you still look at calories. You don't just completely put them by the wayside. They're still important. They're still the end-all be-all when it comes down to just a basic unit of measurement for energy. That kilocalorie is very important. So if you're trying to lose fat, you need to know basically where you stand. But ultimately, if you're fasting and you're producing ketones, you're burning fat. I think you just need to realize that no matter what, things are going to ebb and flow. They won't always be consistent. So you just need to look at the scale. You need to realize if you're eating too much, look in the mirror, realize if you're eating too much or too little, period. Olay says, do I have to be in a calorie surplus to build healthy reserves, muscle, but also fat on a keto diet healthily? Or is a calorie surplus unhealthy in itself? That's a good question. Honestly, a calorie surplus is considered unhealthy in itself. Like, that decreases longevity. It's not good for you to be in a calorie surplus. But the same question comes to mind. When does a surplus take effect? I'm in a surplus as soon as I take a bite of something. If I take a bite of coconut oil, I'm definitely in a surplus at that point in time. So it's all relative, right? Like, but if you are gaining, you're technically working against longevity. If you're gaining fat or if you're building muscle, okay, calorie restriction is the best way for longevity. I happen to carry a lot of muscle, probably because I've been in a caloric surplus at some point in my life, right? There's no way that I've built this muscle on a calorie deficit. At some point in time, I am in a caloric surplus. I honestly don't know when and I don't know where. It's clearly just happened. I hope that that makes sense. Anyway, that sums up today's comment Q&A. But if you have future ideas, like any other ideas for videos, put them down in the comment section below, or any questions that you think that I should address via the means of another video, just let me know. As always, keep it locked in, and I'll see you in the next video.